Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our Week 5 video on which players we're going to be avoiding for Week 5 in NFL DFS on DraftKings. There's a couple guys that we're looking at this week. You're going to notice that there's at least one team that, you guys are going to know right off the bat is not a team that I'm going to be targeting this week in DFS, but we're going to do it like we did the last video. So I'm going to do a little screen share here, show you guys a couple of slides of some of the guys who I don't like this week and reasons why I'm not going to be playing them. So let's call that up right now. Okay, this is the list of guys who I'm not going to be starting this week. Why I think you should be avoiding Antonio Brown and others in Week 5 for NFL DFS on DraftKings. The first guy is obviously going to be Antonio Brown, as the as the statement says. He's 8,700 this week, third highest priced wide receiver, right in a bunch there with guys like Odell Beckham and Julio Jones. The next guy I'm going to be talking about is tight end Tyler Eifert. Eifert is the tight end for the Bengals. 4,600 seems like a really nice price for him, but I'm going to tell you why it's not going to be this week. The first guy who I don't like on that team that I told you I'm not a big fan of this week is running back Latavius Murray from the Oakland Raiders. He's 6,300 this week and definitely not a guy who I'm going to be on. The Arizona Cardinals defense at 3,800 is one that a lot of people seem to like, but I have reason to believe that they're going to have another pretty bad week here and burn a lot of people who are using them. So they're another team that I'm not on. And the last guy on the list is going to be quarterback Derek Carr from the Oakland Raiders, somebody who's had a good start to the season, is pretty cheap, and is going to be one of those cheap options that you're going to hear a lot of people talking about this week that you should use. Now, the first guy up on this list is Antonio Brown. Brown had his worst game all year last time out with 5 catches for 42 yards on only 9 targets. That was his season low in catches, season low in yards, and season low in targets. And remember, they were trailing in that game, so it should have been a game that he had a little bit more work in. Roethlisberger was throwing over 32 times a game for the last 10 games. Many times, especially when they were behind, he was well over 35 in those games. And the only reason that number isn't higher is because there were some games where they were up big and just kind of kept it on the ground with guys like Le'Veon Bell. But Roethlisberger definitely attempted more passes than Michael Vick will be and has done in his first game. Vick only threw it 26 times in his first game. Roethlisberger did have a completion percentage over 70. Vick did as well in his first game, but he's not anywhere near as accurate a passer over his career. So I do think that number is going to come down a little bit, which is only going to make it even harder to make catches, because if you have a guy who has less attempts and a worse accuracy percentage, it's going to be tough for Brown to repeat the numbers that he had been putting up earlier in the season and late last year. The return of Le'Veon Bell was also going to hurt his target numbers, and we always knew that. Bell is somebody who gets a lot of passes out of the backfield, also gets a lot of carries, so there's a ton of touches that are going Bell's way. Early in this year, when Le'Veon Bell wasn't in there, Antonio Brown was basically their biggest weapon, so they were trying to get the ball in his hands as often as possible. With Le'Veon Bell back in the mix, though, that basically goes over to Bell. And when you add all those things together, it's a lot of red flags that you have for Antonio Brown. The reason why I'm going to be staying off him is his price hasn't come down to reflect all these red flags and changes in the offense that they have. He has a different quarterback now who's not as efficient. He has a running back who's going to be stealing, more touches and targets. And when you add all that up and keep his price at $8,700, the $200 or $300 discount that you're getting off of the price we've seen on him the last couple of weeks isn't going to be enough to make me want to use Antonio Brown today. The next guy I want to talk about is Tyler Eifert. Now, Eifert had a huge week 1 where he had 9 catches on 12 targets for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. But that number is now a little bit suspect because he did it against Oakland, who we have come to find out is pretty much the worst tight end defense we have seen, probably in a long time. I mean, they've been giving up huge numbers to everybody that they played so far this year. So you have to take those week 1 numbers from Tyler Eifert with a grain of salt. Now, if you look at his numbers from week 2 through 4, he had a total of only 7 catches on 12 targets for 109 yards and 1 touchdown. So he basically had a bigger game in week 1 than he has in weeks 2, 3, and 4 combined. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think he's somebody that I want to be on big here. Now, since he should be featuring a run-heavy offense this week at home and as favorites against a pretty good defense. And the other problem I have with Tyler Eifert is there's a lot of mouths to feed in that Cincy offense. You got 2 good running backs in Hill and Gio Bernard. You got 3 solid receivers with A.J. Green being a stud. Marvin Jones being a really good deep threat, and also Mohamed Sanu, who basically had a really big year last year when AJ Green was out. So he's got some talent as well. That's a lot of guys that you got to spread the ball around to, and Andy Dalton does spread it around. Plus, like I said, they're a run-heavy team, so it's not like you can expect to see 15 or 20 targets, going Tyler Eifert's way, like you can with some other guys who, maybe not at the tight end position, but even 10 targets would be enough. He's basically averaging 4 targets over the last 3 weeks, so he just doesn't get enough opportunity to really have the upside that you're looking for, even at 4,600, which is a pretty cheap price. The next guy I want to talk about is somebody who you guys know I've been on a lot this season, and that's Latavius Murray. But Murray really scares me this week going up against that solid Denver defense. He has a shoulder injury that held him out of practice on Wednesday, and there's a chance he might not even be ready to play by Sunday. He was pulled in the fourth quarter last game after fumbling, but it's not 100%, which is, his health status, which is the reason why I think he was pulled. I think it had more to do with him not being 100% than it did with the fact that he fumbled. But I do think that the fact that he fumbled had something to do with the fact that he isn't 100%. He will be limited if he does play. And the reason why I've always said to you guys you should use a guy like Latavius Murray is he was the first and second down back. He was the guy that was in there on passing downs. Plus, he was the guy that got all the short yardage work. So if you have all of those things together, that he's not going to be getting, if he's going to not have the volume, if you can get Latavius Murray against a tough defense without the volume, I really don't see what the upside to using him is. He's not cheap at 6,300 on DraftKings. You would still need a pretty big game out of him in order for him to reach value. And if he's not going to be on the field as often and he plays a pretty good team, I just don't see what the upside for using this guy at 6,300 is. The next team that I'm going to be looking to avoid this week is going to be that Arizona defense. They looked horrible last week against St. Louis, who basically ran all over them. They ran up and down for almost 200 yards against this Arizona defense last week. Now, more running means less chances for fantasy points, as we saw last week with Arizona only winding up with a total of 1 fantasy point at the end of the game. And I expect that Detroit is going to try to do the same thing to him after they saw how well the strategy worked last week. That Detroit offense was pretty crisp when they did have the ball, and they're going to be going up against this Arizona offense that we have here. Stafford was getting rid of the ball really fast last week, and Seattle did not sack him once. As a matter of fact, they didn't have a sack, a turnover, or anything until that last play of the game where they knocked the ball out of Calvin Johnson's hands at like the half-inch yard line as he was going in for a touchdown. They had 1 defensive fumble recovery last week, and that was basically the only thing that they had. The ownership will remain high on this Arizona team this week because people see that, big games that they had where they had the interceptions and the touchdowns, but they haven't had more than 2 sacks at all this season. The thing that's really been helping them is they do have 7 or 8 interceptions, but I just don't see that happening here. I know Stafford is someone who's interception prone, but Detroit is at home, and I think this is going to be a tough game for this Arizona defense. I just don't see them putting up 10 to 15 points, which is what they would need in order to pay this off. The last guy we're going to talk about here is Derek Carr. Now, Carr had a hot start, so the narrative that you're hearing this week is, oh, you should take him. They're going to have to throw. Vegas expects them to be down. But he does face the defense that has allowed the least number of passing yards so far this season to opposing quarterbacks. Now, Denver also has a very good pass rush that has come up with 18 sacks in 4 games and 6 interceptions already. So you got to think that Carr's going to have some negative numbers as well. Plus, his wide receivers have very bad cornerback wide receiver matchups, according to Pro Football Focus. And his running back is banged up and maybe out or limited. So you're going to be looking at a guy. They're basically going to be asking Carr to do an absolute ton this game against one of the toughest defenses for a quarterback to do anything against. They're also on the road playing against Denver, who's at home. Actually, they're at home playing against Denver. But still, either way, that pass defense is so good. I just don't see him having a big game in this one. And even though he's only 5,500, you're going to hear a lot of people talk about him because he's cheap. But the matchup is really what is driving me away from him this week and is going to be the reason why I decide not to play him this week when a lot of other people probably are going to be in DFS. Now, that pretty much sums it up for the guys that we're looking to stay away from this week. Those are the 5 on the list that I am definitely not going to have any exposure to in my tournaments or in my cash games at all. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We're trying to do something a little different here to kind of show you guys the thought process behind why we make some of the selections that we make. It's very easy for us to come on here and just say, play this guy, play that guy, this guy's in a good spot, that guy's in a good spot. but we want to be able to teach you guys why we're looking at guys in good spots and why we're looking at guys in bad spots. This way you can do that research on your own and you won't need us anymore. So as much as we don't want to see you guys go, we know that as long as we, help you become better DFS players, you're going to stick around and, try to learn from us as best you can. So thank you for joining us here on RotoCurve. This is Benny Ricciardi with this week's DraftKings guys to avoid. Thank you. And as always, stay classy, DFS.